This ambitious woman took her very first trip to the countryside and instantly picked up on something odd. The names of local stores were nearly identical to those of her assistant, who stood right beside her. That's when a wild thought hit her. Could this broke assistant who had trailed behind her for the last 3 years actually come from a wealthy, hidden family? What she didn't see coming, though, was that this random trip would flip her entire world upside down. Margaret was a powerhouse editor at a top-tier newspaper, pulling in $1 million salary. Her rank in the company was just one notch below the CEO, but because of her icy and commanding demeanor, people behind her back called her the witch. Andrew, by contrast, was just a basic assistant. His daily grind was nonstop, always chasing tasks and glued to Margaret's side. Every morning, he scoured at least 10 streets just to find her preferred coffee. If he brought the wrong kind, she'd immediately slap him with overtime. That's been Andrew's reality for the past 3 years. During that time, he barely had any breaks.
And I need you around this weekend to help review his files and his manuscripts.
This weekend?
You have a problem with that?
No, it's my grandmother's 90th birthday, so I was gonna go home and it's fine. I'll cancel it.
Margaret was more than happy with her always available assistant, but in her high-level role, she made sure to treat everyone by the book. Even senior staff weren't spared. When the deputy editor slipped up, Margaret didn't hesitate. She said Bob had zero professionalism and let him go instantly. Before he could even react, she walked away with her chin high. Her cold pride struck a nerve. Bob stormed out, yelling in frustration down the hallway. He cursed her heartlessness.
Poisonous bitch! You can't fire me because you are threatened by me, and you are a monster.
But Margaret stayed unbothered. Her sharp, logical comeback left Bob with no words.
Listen carefully, Bob. I fired you because you spend more time cheating on your wife than you do in your office.
At work, Margaret had a reputation for being strict and overbearing. Every employee described her the same way. Her no-nonsense style didn't sit well with most, but since her results were perfect, upper management always looked the other way. But this time, Margaret seriously messed up. Buried under piles of work, she forgot to renew her visa. It had now expired, and immigration decided to deport her. The news stunned her. To make it worse, the board announced that once she was gone, Bob would step into her position. Right then, Andrew happened to walk into the office. Staring at him, Margaret hatched a bold plan.
Well, I think there's something that you should know. We are getting married.
Who is getting married?
You and I. You and I are getting married.
We are.
Getting married.
We are getting married.
Yes.
Her boss was shocked, but offered congratulations. If she could marry Andrew quickly, she'd get new status and stay in the U.S. Before he could say anything, Margaret pulled him into her office. Andrew stood frozen. He had no interest in this woman, but after all the years of sacrifice, he couldn't afford to lose the job. So he agreed. Once the legal wait period ended, they'd split and go their own ways. They headed to the immigration office to register the marriage, but the officer quickly sensed something was fishy. He warned them that if this marriage was fake and just for a green card, it would be a felony, punishable by 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. Andrew visibly panicked, but Margaret stayed collected. She said they were visiting Andrew's hometown that weekend to celebrate his grandmother's 90th birthday and announce their engagement. After a tense pause, Andrew mustered up confidence and spun a heartfelt love story. He explained how late nights at the office had made him fall for Margaret. Though they barely scraped by, the officer still gave them a heads up. In 1 week, he'd interview them separately about their relationship, and if their answers didn't match, they'd face jail time. As they left the office, Andrew was visibly shaken. He felt like he was putting too much on the line and wanted something back. He made new demands. Not only did he want Margaret's help getting his book published, but also a promotion. With no choice, Margaret gave in. She promised that once her green card came through, she'd make sure Andrew got the step up he deserved. Still, Andrew felt Margaret wasn't putting in enough effort, so he asked her to take things more seriously. To his surprise, the once untouchable editor-in-chief had to swallow her pride just to secure a green card. For Andrew, this moment finally felt like a win he had long deserved. Not long after, Margaret flew with Andrew to his hometown. On the plane, she made fun of his family's background and insisted that once they were married, they'd be living in her house. Andrew, though, stayed cool. After 3 years of working under her, he was already used to her sharp attitude. Even so, Margaret was starting to feel nervous. She didn't know how to deal with Andrew's relatives. The plane landed soon, and Andrew's grandmother was already waiting by the fence. When they arrived, his mom warmly welcomed Margaret. They all rode through winding hills until they reached a small town. But something strange caught Margaret's attention. The names of shops all began with Andrew's last name. That was just the beginning. What followed shocked her even more.
Please, don't do that. You didn't tell me about all the family businesses, honey.
Maybe because he was on home turf, Andrew no longer spoke to Margaret like a subordinate. Instead, he just stood back and watched her adjust. Still, when he saw her uneasy face as she came down the stairs, he reached out to support her. Soon they boarded a yacht, but Margaret couldn't shake her doubts. Was this really the way to Andrew's house? As her eyes moved past a cliffside, a giant castle suddenly came into view. Margaret's suspicion was finally confirmed. Compared to Andrew, the secretly wealthy heir, she was just a regular woman who worked hard to get where she was. To welcome him home after 3 years, the family had planned a grand banquet. That's when Margaret finally met Andrew's father, Joe. Joe was stern and didn't like his son's choice to work an average job, and his words carried a mocking tone. But Andrew had heard it all before.
You care for some more
Oh, no, I'm fine. Thank you very much.
I think if you just taste it.
During the dinner, Andrew announced their upcoming marriage.
Ladies and gentlemen, Margaret and I are getting married.
The room erupted in cheers, and people teasingly pushed them to kiss. Not wanting to reveal the truth, they went along with it. What Andrew didn't realize was, it was actually Margaret's first kiss. And under the tipsy mood of the evening, both of them felt something they hadn't expected. As night came, Andrew's mother arranged a quiet room for the two of them. Though Margaret felt awkward being around his family, she didn't object. Once everyone left, Andrew laid a blanket on the floor for himself. Sharing a room with his boss for the first time had his thoughts all over the place. Margaret was equally restless and couldn't fall asleep. Early the next morning, Margaret was woken up by her phone ringing.
Is it?
Purse, side pocket.
Frank, darling, just 1 minute.
Oh my God!
Frank, hold on just a second.
She stepped outside quietly, but forgot to shut the door. At that moment, a pricey dog slipped out and started barking at her like crazy. Then suddenly, a hawk dove from the sky and tried to snatch the dog. Still on her call, Margaret chased after them and threw her phone to scare the hawk off. She managed to rescue the dog, but the hawk wasn't finished. It now turned its focus on her phone. Before she could grab it, the bird swooped in and flew off with it. From afar, Andrew's family saw the whole thing and thought Margaret was just playing with the dog. They immediately decided she was an animal lover. Even Andrew was stunned. He never imagined Margaret had a softer, cuter side. Margaret explained what really happened, gently and honestly. But Andrew still seemed unsure, so he told her the family would take her to town the next day to get a new phone. Under their watchful eyes, Andrew and Margaret kept up the act of being a sweet couple.
Yeah. If you touch my ass one more time, I will cut your balls off in your sleep. Okay? Yeah, there you go. Such a good fiance.
Later on, Joe pulled Andrew aside for a serious talk. He apologized for being harsh the night before and gave his blessing, since his son was getting married. But he also shared what he truly hoped, that Andrew would stay and help run the family business. Even then, the distance between father and son didn't seem to shrink. Not long after they got back, everyone saw Andrew suddenly lose his cool. Grace, knowing her son's temperament well, immediately realized her husband was the reason and went straight to talk to him. Realizing this was a family issue, Margaret politely excused herself and stepped out. Joe looked irritated seeing his wife upset, but held back from saying anything. Margaret went back to the room to take a shower, but Andrew, wearing headphones, didn't notice she was there. Living under one roof, these kinds of awkward moments were bound to happen.
What the? Why are you
Oh my God! Don't look at me. Oh God, you're showing everything. Cover it up for the love of God.
As night settled in, the lingering discomfort still hung in the air, but something between them had quietly shifted. The tension that once defined them had slowly been replaced by a deeper sense of warmth. Margaret started dropping her guard, letting Andrew see the softer, more genuine side of her. She told him how much she loved silly variety shows, her obsession with overly dramatic romance novels, and even brought up their first kiss. Bit by bit, she opened up, admitting how she really felt when Bob had called her a wicked witch. Though she looked strong on the outside, it had really hurt, and every time something like that happened, she'd cry alone in the bathroom. Piece by piece, a painful part of her past came into the light. Margaret lost both her parents when she was just 16, and ever since, flowers had become a trigger for grief. Anytime she saw them, her mind would flash back to their funeral. In the warmth of mutual trust and understanding, they connected deeply, moment after moment, and without realizing it, Something tender had begun to grow between them. The next morning, just as dawn broke, a loud knock cut through the stillness. To keep up appearances, Margaret quickly motioned for Andrew to get into bed.
Oh my God!
I'm sorry. It's morning.
Thankfully, they didn't get caught. But to their surprise, Andrew's parents announced they were planning a big wedding for the next day, right along with Grandma's birthday celebration. The news hit them both like a shockwave. They tried coming up with excuses to back out, but Andrew's grandmother rushed out, her voice shaking as she shared her dream of seeing her grandson married before she passed. Faced with her heartfelt wish, Margaret and Andrew had no choice but to go through with it. But Andrew was torn up inside. He was terrified that if the truth came out, it would shatter his mom's and Grandma's hearts. Margaret, though looking cool and collected, was in emotional chaos. She kept reminding herself it was all part of the deal, but the truth was, she had already fallen for Andrew. Soon, Grace and Grandma took Margaret to the family's bridal shop. From their collection of heirlooms, they chose a vintage wedding gown for her. Seeing her future daughter-in-law in that dress brought tears to Grace's eyes. Margaret felt a growing weight in her chest. She was heartbroken to be deceiving such genuine love. Then Grandma pulled out a family heirloom and gently told her it had been passed down for over 150 years from her great-grandfather, and now it belonged to Margaret. Stunned by such a meaningful gift, Margaret didn't know how to respond. The warmth of this family touched her deeply, and tears filled her eyes. But at the same time, a heavy wave of guilt washed over her. Soon after, she found Andrew and started up the yacht. During her stay at Andrew's house, Margaret had felt a different kind of affection, something that felt like real family love. Her heart was full of happiness, but also worry. She feared it was all too good to last, like a perfect dream on the verge of fading. Deep down, she knew it couldn't last, because it was all based on a pretend marriage. Sensing her inner conflict, Andrew quickly took control of the boat. Just then, a buoy popped up in front of them. Andrew turned sharply to avoid it and accidentally caused Margaret to fall into the water.
Now you decide to shut up, Margaret! Margaret!
Come on, give me your hand. It's okay.
They raced back home in a panic. Before they could even settle down, Margaret's father called them into the warehouse. It turned out that Mr. Gilbertson from immigration had found them and had already told Joe about the fake marriage. In front of Joe, Mr. Gilbertson demanded that Andrew tell the truth, offering to be lenient if he confessed. But Andrew didn't hesitate. He chose to protect Margaret. Surrounded by flowers and cheering guests, the wedding still went on as planned. Margaret walked slowly into the venue with Grandma by her side, but as the officiant began the ceremony, Margaret cut in. Standing before everyone, she courageously shared her past, and even more bravely, admitted the marriage was not real. She took full responsibility for it all. The entire room went silent. Not a word was spoken. Everyone looked stunned. The only one with a smile was Mr. Gilbertson. Right then, Andrew felt a strange ache in his chest, a hollow sense of loss. Over the last few days, he had come to see the tender, hurting side of Margaret behind her tough shell. And today, he saw her honesty and bravery with his own eyes. That's when it hit him. He was truly in love with her. He couldn't let her face it all by herself. He ran after her without thinking, but his father stopped him firmly. At that exact moment, Andrew's grandmother collapsed from a heart attack. Everyone scrambled to get her onto an aeroplane. In the chaos, Grandma pulled off her oxygen mask.
I guess they're not ready for me. I'm feeling much better, Sonny. No need to take us to the hospital. Take us to the airport, please.
Come on!
But it was too late. Margaret had already gotten on a plane back to New York. Trying to make up for what happened, Joe quickly used his connections and arranged a private jet. As Margaret was packing her things, Andrew arrived at her New York office and stood by her side.
Now, you can imagine my disappointment when it suddenly dawned on me that the woman I love. So, Margaret, marry me. That would be easier.
I'm scared.
Me too.
Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to support the channel. Thank you for watching.